You are handed a tiny tin, a small spoon, and a few glossy eggs that barely seem like enough to count as a bite. And yet the price can be higher than an entire dinner somewhere else. That is the strange power of caviar. Today, it is one of the world's most famous luxury foods. But at the end of the day, it is still just salted fish eggs. So how did something this small become something this expensive? The answer is not just taste. It is a story of an ancient fish, collapsing wild populations, years of waiting, delicate human labor, and a luxury image that refused to disappear. To understand caviar's price, we first have to understand how fish eggs stopped being ordinary and became a symbol. Let's get into it right here on Secrets of Simple Things. What caviar actually is. The first surprise is that caviar is not simply any fish roe. In the traditional sense, true caviar refers specifically to salted eggs from sturgeon. Salmon roe may be beautiful, whitefish roe may be delicious, but historically, they do not carry the same name, the same status, or the same place in the market. That distinction matters because it narrows the story immediately. Caviar does not come from just any fish that happens to lay eggs. It comes from a much smaller category. And even within that category, not all sturgeon are treated equally. Names like beluga, osetra, and berry are not just fancy labels. They refer to different species, different egg sizes, different textures, different reputations, and often very different price points. So before caviar ever became expensive, it was already selective. It already belonged to a tighter world than the word fish eggs suggests. And that narrow identity became the foundation for everything that came after. Caviar was not born luxurious. Today, caviar feels inseparable from wealth. It belongs to tasting menus, silver trays, mother-of-pearl spoons, and the language of indulgence. But that image came later. There was a time when caviar was not an intimidating luxury at all. In places where sturgeon were abundant, fish eggs could be common, cheap, and easy to ignore. In 19th century America, caviar was reportedly offered in saloons for free, much like salty bar snacks meant to encourage drinking. In some parts of Europe, fish eggs were not always treated as treasure either. They could be discarded, neglected, or valued far less than they are today. That reversal matters because it shows that luxury is not always born inside the object itself. Sometimes luxury is created by history. A thing can begin as ordinary, even abundant, and only later become rare enough, distant enough, and costly enough to feel special. Caviar did not become expensive because humanity suddenly discovered some hidden magic in its flavor. It became expensive because the conditions that once made it easy and familiar began to disappear. The fish behind the food. To understand why those conditions disappeared, we have to look past the tin and back to the animal. Caviar begins with sturgeon, and sturgeon are unusual fish. They are ancient, almost prehistoric in appearance, built more like creatures from a much older world than the sleek fish most people imagine. They can grow enormous. They can live for decades. And most importantly for this story, they mature slowly. Female sturgeon often need many years before they are ready to produce eggs. Depending on the species, that can mean nearly a decade, sometimes more. That one biological fact changes everything. Modern food systems are built around speed. Chickens grow quickly. Many farmed fish reach market size in a relatively short time. But sturgeon do not cooperate with that rhythm. They ask for time, patience, infrastructure, and risk before they produce anything that can become caviar. So the price of caviar does not begin in the restaurant. It begins in the life cycle of an animal that is almost designed to resist fast, cheap abundance. How Rarity entered the story. Once demand for caviar grew, sturgeon were never well equipped to keep up with it. A slow-growing animal can survive abundance for a long time, but it struggles badly once humans begin to harvest it aggressively. Over time, Sturgeon were overfished for both their meat and their eggs. Their waters were damaged by pollution. Rivers were interrupted by dams that blocked spawning routes. Habitat declined. And because female sturgeon take so long to mature, every fish removed from the system was not easily replaced. A market can expand quickly. Biology often cannot. That is how caviar changed from a product of abundance into a product of scarcity. The eggs themselves did not transform. Their taste did not suddenly become richer because of some miracle. What changed was the world around the fish. Sturgeon became harder to find, harder to replenish, and harder to depend on. As that happened, caviar became more valuable not only because there was less of it, but because it was now linked to something people feared losing altogether. In a simple way, caviar became expensive because the fish behind it could not keep paying the bill of human appetite. When wild caviar could no longer sustain the market. Eventually, the old caviar world collapsed. Sturgeon populations fell so sharply that wild harvest could no longer support the trade. Restrictions tightened, protections increased, and the era of relying on wild abundance came to an end. That forced a major shift. Caviar did not disappear, but its source had to change. Instead of taking roe from the wild, producers now had to raise sturgeon themselves. The industry moved from extraction to aquaculture. From that point on, caviar was no longer something nature could supply on demand. It became something producers had to grow, manage, and wait for. Farming did not make caviar cheap. That shift did not make caviar cheap, it only changed where the cost came from. Raising sturgeon requires clean, oxygenated water, controlled conditions, regular feeding, and years of care before a farm earns anything back. Farmers may spend years raising fish before even confirming which ones are female, and only females produce roe. Then they must wait even longer for the eggs to fully mature, and the harvest window has to be timed carefully. So while farming increased supply, it did not turn caviar into a fast or simple product. It turned caviar into a long, expensive investment. The fish may now be farmed, but they still grow on the same slow biological clock. The hidden labor inside a spoonful. And even once the fish is ready, the work is still not done. A spoonful of caviar contains far more labor than most people ever see. After the roe is removed, the eggs must be separated carefully from the surrounding membrane. They are screened, rinsed, inspected, and cleaned. Broken eggs must be picked out. Unwanted tissue must be removed. The salt has to be added in the right amount, evenly and gently, because too much changes the flavor and too little affects preservation. After that, the eggs are drained, checked again, packed, labeled, and kept at proper cold temperatures. This is not a product that forgives rough handling. Temperature matters, texture matters, appearance matters. A damaged egg is not just a damaged egg. It is a small loss of quality, a small loss of value, and sometimes a small loss of trust in the entire batch. By the time caviar reaches the spoon, much of its price is no longer simply in the fish. It is in the waiting, the attention, and the cost of refusing to make careless mistakes. Then the market changed. In recent decades, the caviar market entered another transformation. Large-scale sturgeon aquaculture expanded around the world, and China in particular became a dominant force. Supply grew. Wholesale prices in some parts of the market fell. Caviar was no longer as physically scarce in trade as its old reputation might lead people to assume. That shift mattered. It changed who could produce caviar, who could buy it in bulk, and how widely it could circulate. Suddenly, caviar was not only a relic of old aristocratic supply chains, it was also a modern global product shaped by industrial scale. And yet this did not erase the prestige that caviar had accumulated over generations. More caviar on the market did not automatically mean caviar stopped feeling exceptional. History had already done too much work. The idea of caviar as luxury had become part of the product itself. That is why a modern increase in supply could reshape the industry without fully changing the emotional meaning of the food. What people are really paying for now. Today, when someone buys caviar, they are not paying only for salt, protein, and texture. They are paying for everything attached to it. They are paying for the biology of sturgeon. They are paying for the years it took to raise the fish. They are paying for careful handling and quality control. But they are also paying for ceremony, for reputation, for a food that still carries the aura of rarity even in a market that is larger than it used to be. This is why caviar can appear in surprising new forms, on hot dogs, on chips, in social media videos, and still remain expensive. Those reinventions do not destroy its status, they depend on it. They work precisely because caviar still feels like something special dropped into an unexpected place. Luxury survives in an unusual way. Sometimes it survives not only because a thing is rare, but because it continues to feel rare. And caviar still does. Its small size helps, its history helps, its price helps, even its slight intimidation helps. In the end, what people buy is not just the taste of caviar. They buy the feeling that comes with tasting something the world has agreed to call precious. A small 5-second rule. If you ever taste caviar, give it 5 seconds. Do not swallow right away. Let it rest on your tongue for a moment. That short pause helps the flavor open up and lets you notice what people are actually paying for. Not just the salt, but the texture, the softness, and the slow little burst that makes caviar feel different from ordinary fish roe. So why is caviar so expensive? Because caviar was shaped by everything that makes a food hard to keep ordinary. A slow fish, a damaged wild supply, years of farming, careful processing, and a history that turned scarcity into prestige. So in the end, caviar is not expensive just because it is fish eggs. It is expensive because time, rarity, labor, and luxury all gathered around something very small. And maybe that is what makes caviar so fascinating. It looks simple, it tastes small, but behind that quiet little spoonful is an entire story about how humans decide what feels precious. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Secrets of Simple Things for more stories hiding inside the ordinary things we rarely stop to question.